Um, it's a great privilege to be with you for these 2 days for what has been a mind-blowing event for many people, as I can see in all your faces. And the evidence is on the walls around us of incredible learning and some fantastic projects and ideas and processes and methods and practitioners changing the world for the better, which I think is the wonderful thing about the quality movement in general. And what I want to do today is to put some of this fantastic work you were all doing and also the tremendous events of the last 2 days into perspective, into a perspective that is both global and that is long-term. Because we were all human, we have to make a living, we have to focus on the short term, and we have to sell our products and our services, and that is something I encourage you to all keep on doing. Of course, but in the meantime, it sometimes really pays to stand back and reflect on where we are in this big picture. And that's kind of one of my jobs, if you like. I just suddenly remembered a story from many years ago. I was working with 3M. 3M started quality 30 years ago, right? Along with Xerox and a few other big companies in response to the Japanese. And they got some consultants in to do a fantastic study of how much performance improvement they'd got from quality over the last few decades. And it was just like a sort of a little curve that just, and the consultants kept on saying, it's going to start doing this, you know, the curve like this eventually. But it didn't, it just kept on going straight. And what it turned out was that they were doing a lot of planning, a lot of doing, and a lot of acting. But there wasn't any checking going on. There wasn't much reflection, thinking, space for reflection, as Peter said to us yesterday, for creativity. So take this as an opportunity. Take a deep breath, lean back in your chair, and let's start walking a bit into the future. As now I've got to get this right, Varu Alek Ivan. I can't quite say your name, I'm sorry, but said to you, I'm going to be incorporating in my talk the work that Martine has done over the last 2 years to capture all of your wonderful ideas. And indeed, you'll see, as we go through the presentation, I'm going to use the work you've done to illustrate some of the points I make, and hopefully you'll see the connection, and that will be a good way to synthesize this in your own mind for these 2 days. So without any further ado, let's move on. We're talking about Vision 2050. What will the world be like in 40 years' time? Now, I was born in South Africa, as some of you know. I grew up in Canada and then lived in England for 20 years. But while I was in England, I was 2 years in Silicon Valley and in 3 years in China and Hong Kong. So I was working in 30 countries around the world. So whenever anybody asks me, where am I from? I have great difficulty, because since the age of 5 years old, I've been a planet of citizen Earth. A citizen of planet Earth even, maybe. And so it's been strange for me. I've never really felt an affiliation to a country. The other night, Robert asked me at dinner, he said, so if you had to choose a country, you have to choose a country, which would you choose? Well, I said, okay, Canada, it's a good country. It's progressive, it's liberal, it doesn't hurt anybody. They play ice hockey, they're nice people, you know? And he said, well, and number 2, what would you choose? And I said, well, Africa, because I love the people, the heart, you know, etc. But actually, this is really a story about the planet and us all thinking here globally and acting locally. I've also been privileged to work with a lot of very large organizations at the chief executive level most of my career. My father was a chief executive. I've been a chief executive. I've been an entrepreneur. I've started many businesses. And so for 20 years, I was really working on strategies for the future, whether it was Unilever or Microsoft or Hewlett-Packard or the Hong Kong Taipan, the Jardine Matheson Corporation, and so on. And the World Bank, and there's a long list of people up there. So that's kind of what I did for a living. And part of my story is that I'm a bit of a hybrid. I'm a Gemini, so I'm a twin. And part of me is green to the core. I feel personally hurt when I see somebody dropping a paper in the street. Since I was little, I hated that. I feel hurt when I see somebody cutting down a tree. So when I was a young man, I was the junior mayor of our town in Sandton in South Africa, and we started this fantastic campaign called Keep Sandton Clean, Green, and Serene 40 years ago. And there's me planting a tree with the mayor. We planted tens of thousands of trees. I'm also a musician. I've got a jazz band. And we had pop concerts. So what we did was we raised millions of rands for the black townships. And even in 1972, we engaged with black people because we thought it was important as the youth. Now this taught me, no matter how small you are, no matter how young you are, you can change the world. And I could tell you a million other stories like this, and I'm sure you could tell me as well. Some fantastic stories of how you change the world, but let's just jump 20 years. I was in Borneo, in the rainforest. And we were working with Shell and the Malaysian government to design a sustainable energy industry. But what I saw them cutting down these rainforests and putting ugly palm oil trees in everywhere, logging, destruction. And now 20 years later, it continues. So it suddenly occurred to me, it's all very well doing all this local stuff, but you've got to also act global. You've got to do global things. And at the same time, that year, we brought 30 world experts together for the World Bank, and we said, what do we need to do to create a sustainable future? It was the year of the Rio Summit. So they all came into Oxford from Rio with all these ideas about how we create a sustainable planet. And it was really hopeful because we thought, we can solve the problem. We're not going to destroy our biosphere. We will be okay. Yeah? The experts say so. Then, in 1995, I was sitting in Silicon Valley with the 100 top executives of Hewlett-Packard and a whole lot of consultants, Gary Hamel and futurists and so on. And they said, okay, there's this thing called the information superhighway. We want to be the king of the information superhighway. So how do we do that? So for 5 years, I was in Silicon Valley on and off, helping design what we see today as the internet and e-business. That taught me that when you put investment into a technology like this, especially a communication technology, you can transform the world. Think of it, it was only 15, 16 years ago. I mean, most people didn't have an email address. Unbelievable. Today, this whole conference is real time, online, Twittered, Facebooked. Now then, just after 9/11, despite all this fantastic technology, I flew a few planes into the World Trade Center, and I'd written a book called Managing Complexity, and Tony Blair's policy advisors called me in and they said, we'd like you to tell us what you think the impact of the digital economy on our world is. What is all this technology going to do for us? Because on the one hand, we see a lot of progress, but on the other hand, we see these fundamentalists and other people hate globalization, they hate us, they use our technology to kill us. What can we do? We don't want to kill them. We want a peaceful world. What do? How do we create a win-win-win world? And we did our best, and then he made a disastrous decision to join George Bush's invasion of Iraq, destroyed his prime ministership, and the rest, as they say, is history. But the question still remains, how do we create a win-win-win world? So that's the book. Now, after that experience, it suddenly struck me, there was a new word in the air called social innovation. We've always had business innovation, technological innovation, scientific innovation. But how do we get people from all across different disciplines, government, business, NGOs, artists, designers, philosophers, thinkers, think tanks, together? And we hooked up with the Club of Budapest and lots of world leaders. We said, okay, let's think about how we can do this. Now, we've been running a number of events with people like Barbara Marx Hubbard, who was probably the original futurist. She started the World Futurist Society in 1970-something with Buckminster Fuller. So we got Barbara across for 2 weeks, got all the world experts in to talk about this, and the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and also ISEC. Probably have heard of ISEC, some of you. It's about 30,000 young people around the world who every year are doing internships in big corporations, but they're the leaders of tomorrow in business a lot of the time. So our ISECers are working with us as interns and doing projects and helping us make these things happen. And of course, we've had some great inputs from some very great people. And you'll see I'm going to talk a bit about some of the work we've done here. But let me move on rapidly, because I now want to go back. It's all very well being a futurist. But as my good friend Elizabeth Sahtouris says, the evolutionary biologist who's worked with James Lovelock and many other people, Lynn Margulis, who designed the original models for the sustainability of the planet 40 years ago. She says you also need to be a pastist. To understand the future, you need to understand the past. So today we're going to do a bit of both. We're going to go backwards and forwards. So this report, The Limits to Growth, what did it say 40 years ago? It said, first of all, our footprint can't continue to grow as fast as it has. Secondly, we're going to overshoot our limits. Quite prophetic. Thirdly, it said, and then there's going to be either a crisis or a collapse in the beginning of the 21st century. Why? Because there will be delays in responding to this information. Have you noticed there are some delays out there? This part of the world is very advanced. You fly into some other continents, fly into the Midwest of America, fly into Texas. Take this message, you'll see the delays, right? They're getting it slowly, but we're on a very big planet with 7 billion people, and each one of them counts. They each have to do their thing. So we can't just sit here and say, oh, we're green in Scandinavia. That's great, but it's not going to help when we have 4 degrees warming. And, so we have to think globally here. And the final thing they said was it's important to act as soon as possible. That was 40 years ago. Now, recently, some scientists with very big supercomputers redid the models from the original report with the latest data. What did they find? They found that the actual data tracked exactly the comprehensive technology scenario, which is set to crash, comprehensively crash by 2100, guaranteed. Okay? Now, the only thing that has helped since then is the fact that the original report got the first environmental meeting, which was held in Stockholm, of all the heads of state, and they decided that they needed to reduce population. So the United Nations began programs to help limit population growth. And instead of having 12 billion people in 2050, we'll have 9 billion. So that, you see, a little bit of bad news went a long way there, but it didn't go far enough. Let's just remember something, and you're all familiar with, we're all green here in Scandinavia, right? And Russia is slowly greening too, we see, which is wonderful.